have a stroke or lost a sibling or a parent doesn't mean that your trauma isn't relevant. Like whatever you went through, it's everybody's shit is their own shit.
Yeah,
so whatever you went through, I'm
it's
sure
not a contest. I tell them that all the time in just regular conversation. It's not a contest on who has the most trauma.
Yeah, my friend was like, it's nothing compared to what you went through. It might not be in your eyes, but whatever you went through was horrible.
Yeah.
And obviously left a mark on you. And that's what matters because it changed you.
So we are live on Facebook for anybody that maybe is tuned in right now. The Outstanding Women Leaders podcast. Here we are, Kristen, our co-host.
We've got 2 drinks in, so God bless us.
Extra funny today, so we love that about her. We're joined today with Jen Barbuto, good friend of mine from Hoboken, friend Kayla Darcy. I volunteer with her and True Mentors, and with Heidi Wu, who is on our podcast. And her podcast will be coming out soon. So welcome, ladies. Today we are just some rules for our conversation. It's like Fight Club. No, I'm kidding. You can talk about it. Actually, tell all your friends. We appreciate that. But we are in a sandbox today. We are stretching, we are playing, we are stretching our minds. We're having a conversation. I think Kristen's called it like yoga for your brain.
Yeah, stretch out those brain muscles.
Yeah, it's okay to just jump in and blurt. Maybe sometimes in a sandbox, you knock over a kid's castle. It's totally fine. We're here to just like interrupt conversations and just share our thoughts and feelings and speak from our heart. And today's really special for me. I'm talking about my mom today. 2 years ago, my mom marched into heaven, rearranged the furniture, and started making things happen for the people that she loves. And none of you are strangers to grief. And as the world is literally burning and lots of grief with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, I think it's really relevant today to talk about, where's the meaning in grief? What's the purpose for us as humans to grieve, because grief is a part of our life, and how we've all sort of walked and danced with grief. So
I think before we started recording, we said we're all a little fucked up, and that's kind of where we all kind of bond together. How were you fucked up? We can all kind of relate to each other in that way. And that's kind of what this conversation is about. So many people listening are gonna be like, oh shit, that happened to me. Or yeah, I'm fucked up like that, girl. We're in it together, girl. I promise.
Yeah. And if you're a human, you have at some point probably experienced death. And so that's what we're talking about today. And Kayla, just to start with you, last night was the 1-year anniversary of my mom, or 2-year anniversary of my mom passing away. And you were just incredible. For me as a friend, when I think of finding meaning and purpose and grief, I just think of the relationships that have become stronger and really deepened as a result of tragedy. And you are so amazing. I've never felt so loved in a city where I moved here, just feeling so broken and so unconnected and unloved. And so Kayla accidentally included me on the email chain, but it didn't matter. Reached out to everybody and was like, we need to do something for Katie. She's flying back and forth to see her mom. Like, if you can donate. I was just so overwhelmed. And with that, it was one thing to just ask you guys to cover. I work for an all volunteer organization at the time. So you guys covered all of the kids, all of the program. I don't really know what happened when I was gone, and it didn't matter. That was what was so great. So thank you for that.
Wait, Kayla, what in you makes you want to be that person that helps somebody going through trauma?
Yeah, so well, Katie, thanks for sharing that. And also totally had no idea I included you, but that's such a me move. Oh no, it's okay. Like, I'm like, fuck. Sorry.
We can swear in here.
It's fine. I said all fucked up like 35 times.
That's so true. Yeah. I'm not even surprised. Like, I would do that. But to answer you, Kristen, why? That's a really good question. I think it's part of that thing I mentioned before. So again, I consider myself privileged in the sense, my close, like my parents are still alive, siblings, but at a pretty young age. My dad's set of grandparents, they passed by the time like I was maybe in first grade. And then my grandmother, second grade. So like pretty young. and young also where your like stuff affects you. And I noticed how people really came out, particularly with my mom, since she lost her father pretty young, like 17. So I'm a bit rambling. So I guess I knew from like an early age, like that's just what you did. Like you came together for your people. And I think I am kind of that friend, even with like bridal showers at the office and like stuff like that. And it wasn't even like a question. It was like, okay, like we got to do this. How are we going to get it done?
You're a giver.
I guess so. Yeah.
I love that. But you and people like you are so crucial for when people are going through trauma. Like I remember when I was, even when my sister died, I remember like friends that I was really close with showing up at her funeral. And I remember walking down the aisle and seeing them. It was like taken back just because I felt like so overwhelmed that people, not that they didn't matter to me, but they weren't like in my circle, felt the need to show up and show love and support for me. And I just, that matters. That impacts you in such a way. It's almost indescribable.
Yeah. And Kayla, I have to tell you, I have worked at jobs where I've had trauma. I've worked at a Catholic school. My mom had her first heart attack and was taken by ambulance to Mayo Hospital. I had worked at a charter school in Chicago when my ex-husband had kidney failure and was taken to the hospital and was sat down and told I don't have FMLA because we weren't married. This traumatic event by far the closest hit home to me, but also I didn't have a Kayla at those places, and people like you are so important during the times of grief. We had Julie on yesterday who drove me to LaGuardia. Like anyone that takes you to the airport,
right, like all those things matter so much.
And it
my best friend in Denver would show up with signs that was signed by all my coworkers saying, Kristen, we love you and we miss you. And that took them like 3 seconds to write. But when I read all of those messages, I was just so overwhelmed and just like helped support me and gives you like emotional strength, which is so dire when you're in that state and you like don't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, I mean, you just never want to be alone in a situation.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful that sometimes people who you don't even know can come up and show up for you in your life. Like when I was a new mother dealing with a cancer diagnosis, people were giving me breast milk donations to feed my son. They were like giving me seamless gift certificates so that I could eat. Like it was just my community. People in my community did that and they've never met me. It was just such I don't know, just like it gave me hope in the goodness of people and that I was never alone in life.
I feel like it's so human, but still so rare that we see that all the time.
Yeah.
And they did like a food train for my family and I so often that my dad was like, all right, guys, that's enough. Like we don't need that much pasta, which was, I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like for my parents every day to go home and leave me to make food to bring back to the hospital. So it's like they saved us on so many levels that they didn't even know. They were just offering like, hey, I made my mom's lasagna that I make every Sunday and wanted to give it to you guys. No big deal to them, but made such an impact on my family and like our sanity, because it was just like so much is going on. But the last thing you want to think of is like, fuck, what are we going to eat for dinner?
Yeah. Jen, what about you? You've lost your dad at a little bit younger age. You were 25?
I was 25, yeah, living in Hoboken by myself, which is interesting. Like, I think at that age, you just sort of blow through things. I'm the oldest of 5 girls. I think for me, it was almost a weakness. Or if I was like grieving, it was almost a sign of weakness. So I feel like I just like went right back to work after 2 weeks. Like I just sort of plowed through and never really dealt with the trauma, which is like really messed up. Like my now self would be like, you should have taken time. And I just like did not, right? So I just kind of lived my life and I feel like it sort of crept up on me later in life, right? Have all these
I totally agree with you because I'm a big sister of only sisters too. And when you're the oldest of only sisters, like first off, growing up in a house with only women is psychotic. And there's so many emotions without trauma that like when something horrible happens and you're the big sister and they just naturally look to you because your whole life you've been bossing them around. So it's like when my youngest sister died, my middle sister was like, what do we do? And I just remember being like, okay, now is not the time. I had to help my dad plan my sister's funeral because my mom was like a mess. And yeah, it was not the time to cry and to like crawl up and to stay in bed because it's not an option.
Yeah.
And
Any
so it's like,
I was like too calm, cool, and collected. And then I think it just sort of like crept up on me later. And by then people were like not as understanding, like sort of like get over it. Not that I would ever say that, but like, you know, most of my friends at that age never experienced something.
they don't understand.
They don't fucking get it. Like
They just like wanted me to be okay and like
back to normal, like nothing happened. And it's not their fault. They just missed the old Jen. But when my when I went through therapy now after my stroke, I told my therapist, like my sister, and she's like, let's start there. I was like, all right. But I just remember feeling like I had so much, when you talk about creeping up later, like later in life, and still now, I feel like everyone around me is gonna like suddenly die. And that's like something that I'm working on. But my therapist, we've done so much work that we know that stems from my sister. Yeah. And like, that's trauma that stays with you forever.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sorry, I need you to text and call me whenever you get to the location. If I love you, I just need you to do that because you have no idea what I've seen and what I've been through. And this is just how it's manifested itself in me.
Yeah. Jen, and one thing too, and Kristen, you were kind of hitting on this. I think something, and I really like to hear their thoughts on this. Sometimes people are so quick to say, oh, you're so strong. Like you're so strong when you're going through loss. But like, you don't need to be strong. Like, it's okay. And I don't know. And I think it creates like this like feedback of like, yeah, like stay tough. But it's like, no, like your feelings are to be recognized. Like you can break down, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Cause guess what? It's you, right. Yeah, there's no rules. So I don't know. I'm curious if Jen, I don't know what your experience was like, but if you were just kind of maybe just you were strong without realizing, and if you heard that a lot, and if that you internalized that.
I mean, I think for me, I was like abnormally too strong, but then like the way that sort of I worked through things was to like be there for my friends when they had the same situation because I could relate or talk to them or like be there for them in a different kind of way. It's like, unfortunately, this is like the new club that we're in. Not really PC to say, but like I totally get it. So anytime you need to talk to me, like that was sort of the role that I took. And like, you know, it's different losing a mom than a dad. You have like a much different type of relationship with each parent and whatever that is. I feel like, you know, at 25, everything is so impressionable and probably like I've struggled with like male relationships in a way because I'm like, if my dad was here, I would be able to say, oh, is this like normal?
Yeah. It's not. Whatever you're asking is no.
Like, back, I think is like something that like that's something that I've sort of like grieved and had to deal with over, you know, this 15-year time span. So
I love that purpose that you've found since you've gone through the grief to be that person to reach out, because you reached out to me and said if you need anything, and I wasn't prepared of, oh, I'm blazing the path, you know, I'm the first one at 30. I was 35 when mom passed away, so most of my friends, like, they're not thinking about losing a parent yet. Their parents are not retired yet, or if they are, they're young retired. I didn't really grieve until year one, like when we went to spread our ashes. And it's interesting because the Jewish faith, like that's the big deal for them. And I'm not Jewish, not raised Jewish, but I completely understand that going back with dad. And you guys will probably appreciate this. We went to spread our ashes at the cemetery. But in true Katie and dad fashion, we showed up like 45 minutes before it closed. And dad had written down the plot number, but he didn't like go back and hadn't like check to see. And mom never really visited her family. And so we couldn't find it after looking for 30 minutes to scatter her ashes.
Oh God.
So I'm like, my dad's like, well, fuck. And like, he's just so into it, has to be this day. And the ritual was so important. Like, Dad, it's Tuesday. Let's go to Taco Tuesday for mom, and we'll figure it out from there. So we pull up, and Dad's like, should we bring her in with us? I'm like, why not? Mom loved a good taco. So we brought mom in with us. Dad ordered
Love
an
that.
extra taco for her.
Um,
They were the worst fucking tacos I've ever had. We're like, this place is going to shit. Mom's dead. Like, we're not coming
Terry
back.
was pissed.
So we'll never go there again, which is actually probably a silver lining of itself. And I said, and like, Dad, what do you think about the garden? And like the dogs are both are buried there. And my dad's like, yeah. I'm like, then you don't have to visit her. And my dad's like, yes, but I want to be buried there too. And I'm like, or scattered there too. I'm like, great. So I'm never fucking selling this house in Sterling, Illinois.
Just rent it out.
Sacred ground now.
Just show up with
My
your
dog's
renters.
there. But my dad came out of the closet, after the first year. And so I really, and his grief was so hard. So Jen, Kristen, like you guys talk about being the oldest and the younger siblings. Like my dad was my sibling. And I felt like his grief was way more than mine could possibly be. Like losing a partner that you've loved and been with for 37 years versus a parent. Like I knew that I wouldn't have my mom forever. And I just felt like it wasn't really my place to have grief. And that summer was really fucking hard.
Yeah. I mean, you were protecting him.
Right.
It seems like.
Yeah.
You're like his
space.
person.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful for therapy. Anyone that experiences grief, my family doesn't know how to grieve. I lost Kayla, like you, I lost my grandparents both on my mom's side before I was 2. So I'm named after my grandmother, Katie, who passed away. I'm at her funeral. My mom found out she was having me. So she's like, it's gonna be a girl and her name's Katie. And so I know that my mom had to have grieved a lot for that, but I never saw that as a kid. And my mom didn't like funerals. When grandpa died in high school, like it was just people die and this is how it is.
Mhm.
And so to have a therapist that forced me to make space for my grief and forced me to sit down with my
I
dad.
hate when they force you to do stuff. It's like, damn it, Pam, you're right.
Don't tell
Fine.
me what to do.
And so my dad and I are sitting there with her when he came to visit you in New York, and she said, Katie's grieving too. She is a daughter.
Mhm.
She can't be your therapist. She
Mhm.
can't be your rock all the time. You have to take turns. And that's really been really great for Dad, like both are in our relationship. And I think like
Mhm.
at year 2, I just feel like I'm in with a grief, and because I did the therapy and because I've built this relationship with my dad, I feel like I'm in a really good place with it. But it hits you. I don't know about you guys. I know it's been a long time for both of you, but there's still days where you get sad, I imagine.
So
Yeah.
I lost my sister right before I turned 21. But I think sometimes also when you lose someone that's like part of a cohesive group, like a family like that, you also start to lose like the other people. Like my parents changed after that. They had to bury a daughter, their youngest daughter. They've
Mhm.
changed. They were different after that. Like I remember like my dad putting my sister to sleep, and I overheard him like crying, or he was like upset, which he never does. My dad is definitely like an old school South Side Chicago guy, never cries, but I just heard him really upset saying that God took his baby daughter. And I remember thinking, we went to Catholic school. I remember thinking I remember telling him like, Dad, that's not true. And he said, Christy, go to sleep. It was like his moment, And after she passed away, I remember him being really angry, and my mom just slipped into like a deep depression. And I had to go back to college to finish school, and she was left here with my middle sister. And I remember being so scared for my middle sister because she was home and she still needed like a mother. And my mom and I got into so many fights because like I couldn't understand like what she was going through, like losing a daughter. And she couldn't understand that for me, I lost a sister and it was horrible and traumatic. And, that pain was awful, but I still had to go back to school to finish my degree. That's all you care about when you're 20 is, it's like getting hammered with your friends. I was young. It would be different now, my 30s, but when you're in your 20s, you're a totally different person and you're still trying to figure out who you are. So like, I was also grieving like the difference between my parents. I mean, eventually they came back around, but it took a really long time for things to get back to normal or whatever that is. like for our new family to form without the baby, but it took a
Mhm.
while for sure.
And for me, my experience was my stepmom just totally like bulldozed the whole situation. You were like not allowed to talk about my dad in her presence.
Oh,
Will got changed, all of that. So like the first full year was like super awkward. I like
mm,
got a small box of belongings, which is like ridiculous. And like I asked about his will, which changed, like I mentioned. So like I got a check for $10,000 and like here you go. It was super bizarre and like terrible. And like I had to remove her and their daughter basically like out of my life, which sucks, you know? It was like
sure.
loss on top of loss.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that, like, to your guys' point of like seeing who shows up for you was like so amazing. And like there were so many people that showed up for me that like it's very clear in my life now, like who shows up and who doesn't. And so it's very easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to keep this person in my life, or I don't need this person in my life. So I would say that that's a benefit of learning in life. And I would say that that sort of situation helped prepare me to be very decisive of like who has the privilege of being in my life and who I like.
That's the privilege. I love that you said that so much. I think it wasn't until I had my stroke, because I had to grieve something totally different. Like it wasn't grieving somebody, it was grieving a piece of myself, that I really stopped worrying about who wasn't there. And I started shifting my focus to who is there. Like, sure, does it suck that, you know, so-and-so didn't show up to this event to support me? Yeah. Does it hurt? Sure. But look at all the people that did show up. That person doesn't even matter. It's not even, it has no, he and she have no factor into how beautiful this moment is because of all these people who showed up to my event. And, but that, like, again, I feel like maybe that comes with age, because I didn't really go through any of that till my 30s when I had my stroke, and it was totally a different grieving process.
Yeah.
And now I really do think about who is here. Fuck who isn't here. Look at who is here. That's what matters.
Heidi, I'm interested in your grieving process because you went through brain cancer and almost dying multiple times, and like the old Heidi is not there, just like the old Kristen. I think about the Katie that was married and had this life, like that Katie died too.
I mean, they're dead. I know that sounds vulgar, but for me, I
No,
just feel like that old Kristen is gone. She's dead. There's a whole new one here.
Yeah, it's a process to let go of the person you thought you were and the life that you thought you were going to have. I
Yes.
think when I had cancer the first time after the cardiac arrest and before almost dying again, but really after the psychotic event, I was so depressed because not only did I go through so much, but I lost a sense of control of my own mind in a way that I never had experienced before. Like I had a psychotic episode where I was going to kill myself because I thought I was the devil, you know, and like I couldn't control that and I couldn't get out of those delusions. So I think that was so scary, just to know that I could lose control of my mind in that way and harm myself. And that's not who I thought I was at all. And it took a long time. It took years to just let go of that person. I don't know. I don't know if it was like a conscious effort to like let go, but for me, grief was just a really, really long and hard lesson in learning to let go of what was and just make space for possibility for what could be. It's really painful.
Straight up sucks. Going through grief straight up sucks. But I do think we talk about like the purpose of it today. I don't wish I lost my sister. Like I wish she was here running around, and I wish I had my third sister. But I mean, my family learned so much from her death, and like it changed like the trajectory of like my family. Like she was special needs, and that is a life we knew nothing about. But whenever we talk about her, we talk about how she changed us because we got involved with Special Olympics. I was a reporter before I got fired, but I did a lot of stories on special needs kids because that's what I knew, and I wanted to get those stories out there. So she changed our lives, but you know, just not in, I think, the traditional sense where she's still here and we can like look to her and be like, look what you did. I mean, she's gone now, but she still left her mark.
Of course. And
fucking sucks.
It
so
really sucks. It's such a dark
It's
hole.
hard.
It's like going through a swamp or something. But
Yeah,
I
it's
think
heavy
you were
to know.
able to make so much meaning out of that
Mhm.
pain. And that's what I hold on to instead of, like, for me, it's painful to be a human. It's painful to remember. My body remembers what happened on the anniversary of every single event. And I go
Yep.
through this really low. And you just, for me, I just don't fight it anymore. I just respect that I need to be sad and just give myself time to really cry and think about how painful that was and be grateful that I'm no longer there. But it's always going to be part of my story. And I don't feel like, now I don't feel burdened by it anymore. I really find strength in the fact that, like, I got through it and that it brought meaning to my life that I wouldn't have had I not gone through it. And that makes me feel like, I don't know, more prepared, I guess, for any hard thing that comes my way. Like,
Yeah.
now I don't stress about the things that I used to stress about because I went through
Yes.
such shit. Like, it's not a big deal anymore to me.
I know,
you
like, oh, she didn't call you back, bitch. You were paralyzed last year. Like, you were fine. I'm like, whatever.
Exactly.
But yeah, those little things don't seem as big as they used to.
Yeah. I
Heidi, how
definitely
old are your kids now, and how old were they when everything happened? And how do you think like you've been able to sort of recover with your relationship with them?
Oh gosh, so my son's 2, and I was not a mother when I went through all that. I was pregnant when the cancer came back,
Okay.
and I had to revisit that trauma. But it actually helped to have Ben, because he gave me a reason to be like different and to deal with it differently, because I had to protect him from my grief. And like, I think a part of me like suppressed a lot of the pain because I wanted to be strong for him and I didn't want him to feel sad, like my sadness, because he's, babies feel everything. But I also like let myself have space, like when I was alone or if someone came to help or my husband took him, to just like sit with the grief. I'm still grieving what happened because I can't have another baby. Like, I thought I was going to be a mother to 3 kids. I thought I was going to, have like a football team as my family. I was like obsessed with the Sound of Music and I wanted to be like Maria von Trapp. And I'm not going to get pregnant again. And I'm
You
still
still can
grieving
be. You
that.
just gotta find, this man with a bunch of kids.
Well, my husband's an only child and I'm not leaving him after he saved my life like 3 times. But he's like,
Isn't that funny when the men that stay around, you're like, I guess I'm stuck with you forever. I can't leave your ass now.
It's true. Like, I really remember, I have to like, sometimes when I'm really mad at him, I'm just like, you're such an idiot. But I know like
You
you're a
saved
good
my
person.
life. So I guess
You can still be a lifesaver and also an idiot. Those things have
Yes.
nothing to do with each
Yeah,
other.
they're not mutually exclusive for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I forget what I was saying.
You mentioned the word, like this idea of like being strong for your son so that he didn't see you grieving. And I think about my mom. So my mom, her mother got into a car accident. It was her second one. She sideswiped her best friend's car in accident. They live right next to each other. So she pulled in, she was shaking. She called my mom and she's like, I'll never live through another car accident. And my mom said, it's going to be okay. Go to bed. I'll come over tomorrow. My grandmother didn't wake up.
Oh my
So my mom
gosh.
didn't get to go over the next day and calm her down. And
Oh.
I never had the opportunity to ask my mom, what that's like. And I imagine I was a kid, I was 2, or I wasn't a kid. She was pregnant with me. I imagine though, like being a kid. And I remember finding through her funeral, I found a letter she'd written where she missed her mom. It's like she had a 2-year-old. She's like, I have a 2-year-old and I just want to call my mom and talk to her about how hard this is. And I can't. And she was writing a letter to like no one. And whenever I think about guilt or I think about, feeling like I should have done this for my mom, or I wish she knew this, I can only imagine the guilt my mom must have felt. And I refuse to let myself feel that way. But we didn't grieve. We didn't talk about it. And I think for me, I grew up thinking being strong meant you lock the door, because my mom had a deadbolt, and the only time that door was locked was you could hear her crying on the other side of it.
Oh.
And strength for me, I think, is saying, I can't make it to your party today because I'm depressed. Or I can't, sorry, Jen, I didn't make it to your 4th of July one year. I was depressed that day. I didn't tell you that though. I just didn't make it. And or being strong is saying, I'm sad today, honey, and it's okay. I'm not going to be sad tomorrow, but I need to be sad today. Keela, what was that like for you as a kid, seeing your parents grieve their parents?
Yeah, it's interesting because similar, Katie. So my mom lost her father when she was 17. And like that was a pretty traumatic experience. He had a heart attack and she basically watched it happen.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I think that's where I get like, the inherent fucked upness, but and I use, as you can see, humor to cope through a lot of it.
Same.
And yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think, like I was so young. So maybe like I'm, if anything, I think I'm picking up things now. And I'm excited for this future right now because we're finally recognizing our feelings and realizing like, no, like you don't have to sweep it under the rug. Like, no, like it's okay. Like, from this, I found out like my aunt, my mom's sister, like ended up having an addiction, like alcoholism. And it's like, and this all stemmed from that one traumatic event. And it's upsetting to know that like, wow, like maybe this could have been avoided if, we address things and talk things out. And it's interesting too because so my partner, my boyfriend, he lost his father at 13. Pretty young age, younger than my mom. And it's like, and I'll just say like, just seeing, I guess, or not doing the talking it out, dealing with it can really affect you later. So
Sure.
I'm really proud he's going. Oh, well, this is on Facebook Live, but I doubt he's watching. But he's dealing with the shit. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to air his baggage. But it's, I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling right now. But it's I'm excited that we're in this new culture of like, no, like it's cool to be sad. You don't need to like put up a face. You don't need to, I think every scenario is different. Like Heidi,
sad, right?
Yeah.
It's wrong. It's cool.
Yeah, I
Fucking sucks to be
completely.
sad.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
really
I
love
love-
saying sitting in the shit. Like for me, like when I have a bad day, I'm not doing anything. Like I'm gonna sit in the shit. I'm gonna think about how awful I feel, why I feel like that. Like if I have an appointment, it's canceled. And I think old Kristen would have felt so horrible for canceling, but the new one's like, no, girl, you got to deal with this. So it is what it is. But I think sitting in the shit is so important and like dealing with whatever you're feeling so that it doesn't ripple effect out later into like your other relationships, because that can manifest so badly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, Brene Brown is like one of my favorite people in the world. And she
I
talks
love
all
Brene.
about vulnerability being like,
Mhm.
that's our strength. And I think I agree with Kayla, what she said about this change and this sense of accountability right now. It's like, it's interesting and sort of exciting to see what will come of this because we're having like a huge culture shift. I don't know. In my family, we never talked about anything. One, there's a huge language barrier because like my parents don't speak English well enough to be able to convey their feelings and to explain that to me.
So is that a
And-
cultural thing? To like
Well-
not talk about your feelings?
It's probably also cultural, but I think if I probed them, they would share because I was always like an inquisitive kid. And my mom had no problem telling me how terrible my father was growing up. And I was her therapist in that way when I was a kid. She would just complain to me for hours about what an asshole he was. But yeah, I don't know. I think like for something, I know Ben is like really, really sensitive to other people's pain. And I know that part of that is because he picked up on what happened. And that's okay. I'm okay with that as long as we can have a conversation later once he can understand, because he's 2, like once he can understand like what that was and what that means and ask questions. Like he's just a baby right now. And I do think it was a disservice to me. Like when I got cancer the first time, and after the cardiac arrest, I didn't give myself any time to recover. I went straight to work as soon as I could because I just didn't want to I just didn't want to face the fact that I died, that I was clinically dead for 30 minutes in the cardiac arrest and in a coma. And I just didn't want to face that scary fact and what that meant. And so I was in denial for a long time. And I think that's ultimately part of why I had the psychotic break, because I was so pent up with stress. But over time, like I've had my, I've had my like good couple years, which I just cried for no reason. And that was important. But I think also now, like, I don't know, I don't have those days anymore, not as much. And I'm grateful for that because they were so paralyzing, but it's been 6 years. Like, I feel like that's a long time. And I think when I was pregnant and in the months when Ben was born, he was so hard and we weren't sleeping at all. He didn't sleep for the first year of his life. So we've like the first like year and a half of his life. So we've only just completely woken up and had our cognition back. But it was really tough. And so there was just no space for me too. Like I had to take
a big part, right? When
Yeah,
you like,
sleep is everything.
how do you take space to grieve when we live in a society where you got to get back to work? Depending on your job, it might be more work if you don't have to go. Right now, I'm really grateful that I was told not to come back to work because now I get to grieve the world. And my mom and even my cousin, who was recently diagnosed with kidney failure and congestive heart failure at the age of 33, like to not have shit in the world, like going on, like, or in for work, like it does allow you to grieve. And for me, I just think about people telling me how strong I am. I'm like, I wasn't strong. I did what everybody else does. I just fucking ignore it and pretend it's not there.
Yeah.
We look at people that cry and can't get out of bed as people that are weak, but true strength, you're going to be sad for the rest of your life when a part of you is missing or when something traumatic happens. You won't be sad every day, but I don't think there's a timeline on grief, and whether it's a grief of someone that you've lost or you're grieving a mental state that you no longer have or a person that you no longer are. Or you're
Interested to know if you don't have to answer this. Is everyone not in therapy here? I mean, I'm in therapy.
I'm
And
not. I mean, Katie and I talked about this before. Like, I did therapy for like different relationship situations, but like I sort of opted for more of like a life coach of like, I need direction. So I never like let that experience sort of paralyze me in therapy. And there's nothing wrong with therapy. I just feel like I sort of wanted to find a new life and like move forward. And I don't know, I think I've done like an okay job doing that. So like for
I think
me,
that's your choice. You do whatever makes you feel better.
I don't want to go backwards because like I think, and that's been something that I've dealt with my mom. Like my parents were divorced and my mom and I would like, I was sort of her crutch. So we would always talk about like the past and like all these things. And so I carried a lot of weight on my shoulders. And then when I met with this life coach, I'm like, I no longer need to do that. Like I need to concentrate on my own life and moving forward and what I want to make out of my life. So
Right.
it was like a more positive experience for me than sort of like going back into that. Cause I'm like, that was tough. I mean, I had to visit, not had to, but my dad was really sick for a very long time. So like every weekend or every other weekend consisted of me going to visit him either in the hospital. I mean, I watched him die for like almost 3 years. So
oh my gosh.
I'm like, I don't want to relive this again.
Sure.
I get it. So like, what do I need to do to sort of move forward? So
I think everyone should do what is best for them. I love therapy and I'm a huge proponent of it. Like, I feel like everyone needs therapy, even if you didn't go through trauma. Like if you had a tough childhood, kids were mean to you at school, therapy.
I do love though that Jen made a plug for coaching, and she also talked about the difference between the two. I don't know if anybody knows a coach on this show, but if you did, like Jen and I have both done life coaching, and we've had some, like I got divorced at the end of mine. Like it was about my future. I then realized I might want to unpack that shit I just went through. And so I feel like there's a great balance of both, but I love that you mentioned that coaching is about your future. And I think you do reach a certain point. I have maintenance therapy. So once a month I talk to my therapist. I kept trying, like, we were breaking up, we were not breaking up, we were breaking up, we weren't breaking up. We decided that maybe we would be better off if we just had some maintenance. But I do love the coaching in the future. I think at some point, as you work through those stages of grief, like Heidi, you talked about denial, like stage 1. And I thought I would just shoot to the meaning and the purpose. Like, oh, I understand the meaning and purpose. And you don't actually get to pick which times you're in the steps. And like a cha-cha, like you take 2 steps forward, you're like, ooh, I'm in stage 5. Ooh, nope, sorry, I'm back into stage 1. Like, denial about mom not being here for Christmas or something. So thank you guys so much for joining us and speaking so openly and honestly about your grief.
Thank you for this opportunity.
We lost Kristen along the way.
Oh no.
We were gonna wrap up anyway, so I don't know what happened. She had like a mic thing and then she went away. Kristen would also thank you. Last question before we log off, ladies. You all have incredible superpowers. What would you give if you were to give advice to your younger self? This is Kristen's question, so I'm representing her here. What advice would you give? And we'll start with Kayla. You're the youngest, so we're gonna start with you. Would your 26? What are you, 26?
No, I'm 27.
27. All right. What would your 27-year-old self tell little Kayla?
Little Kayla? Oh gosh, I think don't care about what other people think. I definitely don't give a shit now, but I felt like I spent so many years like caring and even thinking of like, well, should I do this? Should I not do this? And it's like, no, if it's the right thing to do, then do it and don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. I love that.
I still overthink, but I'm getting better.
Jen, what about you?
I would say for me, it's like live in the moment, right? I mean, my relationship with my dad was so amazing and we did so many things in a short amount of time. And I think like kind of just own it and you don't have to be so cool all the time, you know? And I think for me, like if I could tell my younger self, like experience what you're going through and like own that grieving process. Like life, you have plenty of time, right? And so just to sort of like glaze over it is never going to help anyone. So.
Heidi?
Oh, I would tell myself those things too. I'm actually telling myself that now, as Kayla was saying, like, don't give a shit. I give too many shits. I don't know. I guess just to be patient with the process. I was so in a rush to just get better. And that was part of the problem. It's like, I just didn't honor what I had been through and there was no space for it. I had a friend who lost her mother to breast cancer, and she told me she's a PT, and she was just like, you don't have to be so strong all the time. You can cry. But I was so numb. I like made myself numb and I didn't understand that I had done that, but I did that in order to just survive and get through the day. So just to really, really be kind and patient to myself.
I love that. Thank you guys so much. So if you're out there grieving, as we all are, I love that all of you sort of had the same theme of be patient with yourself, own it, go through the process, and reach out to those friends with those superpowers like Kayla that show up for you, or Jen that provides that space for you, or Heidi that can just fucking relate to you. Thank you guys so much. This is it for our BYB. Kristen usually ends these, I feel like. If you want to hear more from the Outstanding Women Leaders, you can follow us on Instagram at Outstanding Women Leaders. Follow us on Facebook. Check out our podcast. We are on Apple. We're on iTunes now. So we're really making it out here, guys. You can catch Heidi's podcast coming up in a couple weeks. It releases. We're going to have Jen on for a podcast. I would be honored to have Kayla on for her own as well. Thank you, ladies. You guys are amazing owls, and we're just so lucky to be able to share today with you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having us.
Cheers. That's right. Cheers.